For the first time since World War II, 40 of America's closest allies just told Washington no. The United States Navy is sitting in the Persian Gulf right now, enforcing the largest naval blockade the Middle East has seen in 40 years. 2 aircraft carriers, 18 warships, 10,000 American sailors on station. More American firepower concentrated in one stretch of ocean than most countries have in their entire military. And the countries that have marched beside the American flag in every major conflict since the end of World War II, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, Canada, Japan, Australia, just publicly announced that they will not participate in this one. This is not a minor disagreement. This is not a diplomatic gesture. On Friday of this week, 40 countries are holding a video conference to discuss how to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The United States is not on the invitation list. France and the United Kingdom are running the meeting. The plan they are putting together is specifically designed to take effect after the American war is over, not during it. And President Trump responded to all of it on social media with a single line that summed up the moment better than any political analyst could. NATO was not there for us. They will not be there for us in the future. By the end of this video, you will fully understand why America's oldest allies refused to join the most ambitious naval operation in the Middle East in a generation, what that refusal actually means on the water right now, and why this single moment may be the most important thing that has happened to the Atlantic Alliance in its 75-year history. Let us start with what a naval blockade actually requires, because understanding the scale of the operation is the only way to see why Allied participation matters so much. A blockade is not one ship parked at a harbor entrance. A blockade is a continuous military operation covering hundreds of miles of ocean, 24 hours a day, in every weather condition, for however many months it takes to make the target country give in. To maintain that kind of operation, a navy needs warships for stopping and boarding vessels, specialized ships for clearing mines, aircraft for continuous overhead surveillance, helicopter gunships for close-in response, refueling tankers to keep the fleet supplied without returning to port, and thousands of trained sailors rotating through every duty station. Iran's side of the Gulf has hundreds of small, fast attack boats, an unknown number of naval mines scattered across the seafloor, coastal missile batteries, and a doctrine of using swarms of cheap weapons against expensive warships. Every day of the blockade burns through ammunition, fuel, spare parts, and crew rotations, and the American taxpayer is paying every single dollar of it. Now here is where it gets really interesting. The United States expected help. For decades, every major American military operation in the Middle East has been a coalition operation. Desert Storm in 1991 had 35 countries contributing military forces. The Iraq War in 2003 had 46. The fight against the Islamic State had over 70. When American planners sat down to design the Hormuz blockade, they assumed a similar coalition structure. American aircraft carriers would provide the core, and allies would contribute minesweepers, escort destroyers, patrol aircraft, and logistical support. That was the assumption. That assumption just died in public. The United Kingdom went first. Within hours of President Trump's announcement on April 12th, the British government quietly informed American officials that the Royal Navy would not participate in the blockade. British officials then repeated this publicly through statements to the British press, framing their decision as a commitment to freedom of navigation that did not require joining an American military operation. The language was polite. The meaning was not. For the first time in modern history, the closest military ally the United States has in the world had looked at an American operation and walked away. Britain and America have fought every major war together since the Second World War. Britain and America share the most sensitive military intelligence on Earth through what is called the Five Eyes Agreement. Britain and America operate nuclear submarines on coordinated patrol schedules. And on this one, Britain said no. France went further and louder. President Emmanuel Macron stated in public that a military blockade of Hormuz is not realistic, and that any ship attempting to pass through a forcibly opened strait would be exposed to coastal threats from Iran. That sentence, translated from careful diplomatic French into plain English, means the French president just told the world that he believes the American blockade will get people killed, and that France will not be part of it. Germany added its own refusal through quieter channels. Australia publicly declined. Canada let its silence speak. Country after country, the same decision, reached independently, announced separately, adding up to the same result. But here's the problem. The refusal is not just France and the United Kingdom. The 40-nation coalition that is meeting on Friday includes Germany, Italy, Canada, Japan, Australia, Norway, Sweden, the Netherlands, Spain, Belgium, Denmark, and roughly 30 other countries that have fought beside the United States in every major conflict of the last 3 generations. These are the allies that sent troops to Iraq and Afghanistan. These are the allies that signed the original NATO treaty. These are the allies that stood with America during the Cold War when the Soviet Union pointed nuclear missiles at Western Europe. And every single one of them just chose not to show up. There is another angle that almost nobody is talking about. The coalition that is meeting on Friday is not just declining to join the American blockade. It is organizing an alternative. The United Kingdom, which started this group back on April 2nd before the blockade was even announced, is building a plan for reopening the Strait of Hormuz through diplomatic pressure at the United Nations, economic sanctions on Iran, and international mine clearance operations that would start only after a ceasefire is agreed. In plain terms, the 40-nation coalition is saying, we will help fix the strait, but we will help fix it after America stops trying to do it by force. That is not a supporting position. That is a competing position. 2 major groups of allies, each with their own plan for the most important waterway on Earth, working in parallel instead of together. Think about what that means in practical terms. When you see those American destroyers sitting in the Gulf of Oman right now, stopping tankers one at a time, boarding them, checking their cargo, turning them around, you are watching an operation that most of America's traditional partners have decided they will not support. When the USS Frank E. Peterson crosses the strait at 3 knots looking for mines, there is no British minesweeper behind it. When the USS Abraham Lincoln launches fighter jets to patrol the lanes, there are no French or Italian carrier escorts taking some of the load. When 10,000 American sailors rotate through 12-hour shifts maintaining the blockade, there are no German or Canadian or Dutch sailors sharing the duty. The full weight of this operation lands on the United States Navy. And every day the blockade continues, the cost keeps running up on the American bill alone. Stop and ask yourself an honest question. Americans built the most powerful navy in human history. American taxpayers have paid for every ship, every sailor, every missile, every gallon of fuel. American families sent their sons and daughters to serve on those ships. For decades, the American military carried Europe through the Cold War, liberated Kuwait in 1991, removed Saddam Hussein in 2003, fought the Taliban for 20 years, and kept the global shipping lanes open so European economies could keep running. And now when the United States is doing exactly what American power has always done, standing in the way of a hostile regime trying to choke off global oil supply, 40 of the countries that benefited most from all of that American protection have decided this one is not worth their help. Is this a historic betrayal of the American alliance by countries that were happy to accept American protection for 75 years and then refused to pay the bill when America needed something back? Or is this a reasonable decision by sensible governments that understand this particular war is not worth joining? One side says NATO has written off America. The other side says NATO is trying to save America from a mistake. Write which side you are on in the comments, because the people who say this is betrayal and the people who say this is wisdom are going to have the most heated argument this channel has ever seen. And it gets worse, because the reasons these allies are refusing are not what most American news outlets are telling you. The surface explanation is that the allies disagree with the military necessity of a blockade. That explanation is incomplete. The real reasons are more complicated, and they tell you more about the current state of the American alliance than any official statement does. Reason 1, European governments are worried about Iranian retaliation against their own oil infrastructure. Iran has already attacked energy facilities in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates during this war. If European navies join the blockade, Iran could target European-flagged tankers, European oil companies operating in the Gulf, or European embassies in the region. Reason 2, European economies depend heavily on oil flowing through Hormuz. A long blockade means high oil prices, and high oil prices mean European voters will be very angry at any government that helped cause the situation. Reason 3, there is significant distrust of the Trump administration among European capitals. European leaders watched Trump threaten a 50% tariff on Chinese goods in the middle of the same week he was asking for Chinese help on Iran. European leaders noticed that Trump's first reaction to their refusal was a social media post calling them unreliable. European leaders do not trust that joining this operation will be rewarded with continued American protection. This is where the conversation fundamentally changes. The fourth reason, and possibly the most important one, is that European governments believe the American blockade is going to fail. They look at the numbers and they see a single Iranian-sanctioned tanker, the Rich Star 4, already slipping through the blockade on April 14th and delivering oil to China. They see 9 vessels entering the strait and 8 leaving on the same day, despite CENTCOM's claim that 0 ships had made it past. They see Iran's government still standing after 45 days of war, still refusing to give up its nuclear program, still running a cryptocurrency toll system at Larak Island. And they see an American president publicly saying the war is close to over, which in European ears sounds like an exit strategy being negotiated rather than a military campaign being won. If the blockade is going to collapse anyway, why attach European reputations to a failing operation? Now, here is where this starts affecting people who do not follow naval geopolitics. The 40-nation refusal has direct consequences on the gas prices paid by every American family. When allies share the load of enforcing a blockade, the operation can continue indefinitely without burning out a single nation's military. When the United States runs the blockade alone, every dollar of the cost lands on the Pentagon budget. Every hour of wear and tear lands on American ships and sailors, and every political cost of a drawn-out operation lands on the American administration. That means pressure builds on the United States to end the operation faster, which means either rushing to a deal with Iran on terms less favorable than America wanted, or escalating the military pressure to force a quicker conclusion. Both paths have the same result for the American public. Either gas stays expensive for a long time while the blockade grinds on, or gas gets more expensive very quickly if the war escalates further. There is no version of 40 allies refusing to help that leads to cheaper fuel at the American pump. There is also a longer-term consequence that most Americans have not yet noticed. For 75 years, American power has been built on the assumption that allies would support American operations. That assumption allowed the United States to project power globally with a smaller defense budget than it would otherwise need, because Allied ships and Allied troops shared the burden. If the assumption is now broken, American defense costs go up, permanently. A Navy that has to operate alone needs more ships than a Navy that operates with allies. An Air Force that has to patrol alone needs more aircraft than one supported by coalition partners. Every American taxpayer is now paying more for defense because 40 allies chose not to join this operation, and that bill is going to keep growing as long as the alliance remains broken. There is a specific detail about the Friday meeting that deserves attention. The 40 countries holding that video conference are not random. The list reads like a roster of America's most important strategic partners in every region of the world. Every single country that has ever hosted an American military base. Every single country that has ever joined a coalition under American leadership. Every single country that has ever bought major American weapon systems and integrated them into their militaries. All of them, on the same call, without an American seat at the table. The French and British ambassadors who organized the meeting did not publicly announce the exclusion of the United States. They simply did not send an invitation. In diplomatic terms, that omission is as loud as a shout. Meanwhile, the two countries that are most happy about all of this are watching carefully. China and Russia have been quietly celebrating the NATO split. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov flew to Beijing this week specifically to coordinate the Russia-China response to the Iran situation. The first question in those conversations, according to every diplomatic reporter who covered the meeting, was how to take advantage of the European refusal to back the American operation. If the transatlantic alliance that held together against the Soviet Union for 45 years can be cracked open by a single war in Iran, what does that mean for Taiwan, for Ukraine, for every other place where American commitment has held the line against aggression for decades? The NATO split is not just about Hormuz. It is about whether the American security guarantee means anything anywhere else in the world. Consider the historical moment you are actually watching right now. Desert Storm, 35 countries contributed forces. Iraq War, 46 countries. Fight against ISIS, more than 70 countries. The Hormuz blockade in the year 2026, the United States plus Israel plus a handful of Gulf partners. That is the measurable collapse of coalition warfare as Americans have understood it since the end of the Cold War. Whether the collapse is permanent or temporary depends entirely on what happens in the next few weeks. If the blockade succeeds and Iran capitulates, the Allies will quietly return to the fold, and the whole episode will be written off as a temporary disagreement. If the blockade fails, or if it drags on for months without a clear result, the Allies will use their absence as evidence that their judgment was correct, and the next American operation will face even more reluctance. Every day the blockade continues without visible success, the 40-nation coalition becomes more confident that they were right not to join. So here is the question that matters. Americans built the finest navy in human history with their own tax dollars. Americans have spent 3 generations protecting European economies, Asian trade routes, and global shipping lanes while those allies benefited from the security without paying the full cost. Now, at the exact moment America is trying to do what American power has always done, 40 of those allies have decided this one is not their problem. Think about that honestly and tell me what you actually believe. Is this the moment NATO officially broke, meaning Americans should pull back from defending countries that refuse to defend them? Or is this the moment America finally went too far, meaning the Allies were right to stay home and the Trump administration is the one that miscalculated? One side says the Allies betrayed America. The other side says America betrayed itself by picking a fight the Allies could see was unwinnable. Write where you stand in the comments, because the people who say America should go it alone and the people who say America needs to rebuild these alliances are about to have the most important argument on this channel. And if you have not seen our breakdown of how the United States Navy is actually enforcing this blockade without Allied support, what ships are doing the work, how every tanker gets intercepted, and what happens when a captain refuses to stop, make sure to watch that one next.